to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with the Business Blueprint, and I want to welcome you back to part 2 of Business Continuity Planning. Today, I'm joined by Dan Cuneo and Rebecca Malone, and we're going to continue our conversation of talking about what happens in your business if the worst happens. That's called planning continuity. Last week, we talked about kind of an overarching theme. What is business continuity planning? What are big themes like data? If there's a hurricane, if there's a snowstorm, what do we do? And Rebecca started breaking it down into the different departments. And, what she was talking about with the financial department was, making sure that all the knowledge is not stored in one person's head, making sure your policies and procedures are written down and accessible to everybody, making sure that an entire department doesn't rely on one hire. If that one hire calls and says, hey, I quit, which happens, even with great employees, they quit on the spot sometimes because something in their life came up where they need to move on, that your whole department doesn't fall apart. And paying attention. And this is where we stopped last week, was paying attention, because I really wanted to go back to paying attention. I talk to so many business owners that think once they build out these individual departments, they can kind of relinquish some of the attention paying duties to somebody else, looking at bank accounts every day, looking at, where money sits. And as Rebecca said, cash is king. So if you just check your bank accounts every morning and you see something fishy, like, ooh, that went down by $50,000 in a day or $5,000 or whatever your pain point is, then you've got to start looking, because it does not take long for somebody to drain your entire account, no matter how much money you have in it. And when the more employees that you have that have access to your money, it doesn't take long for a lot of little nickel and diming to become big problems. And one of those points of access is credit cards. So business continuity planning goes to understanding what would happen if for some reason every single credit card you had outstanding was maxed out. Could you pay it off? You have, and Rebecca can talk to us a little bit about that, because there are certain controls you can put in place. And can you explain this to us, Rebecca?
Sure. So making sure that you have liquidity, right? Liquidity is just the number one thing. There's no two ways around it. And so keeping an eye on where your expenses are right now and where they're going to be going in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months is key. And that way you can understand how much liquid cash do I need to have access to, and whether that's in checking or savings or a line of credit, something that is just very easily accessible where you can use it at the drop of a hat to pay something off. So making sure that is in line, what you have access to is in line with what you're projecting to be spending is key, because once you fall behind, you're going to be behind and behind and behind and behind. And then what likely ends up happening is you take out some sort of loan that maybe isn't the best terms or something like that. And so overall, you're impacting the company financially. You're encumbering it now with some sort of debt that it didn't really need to take on if you had just been a little bit more proactive and a little bit more forward looking. So that's really the number one thing, is maintaining that liquidity and doing the projections so that you know how much you're going to need, not just today, but 6 months from now.
Yeah, there's also automatic things you can do, right? Like if you're going to give out employee credit cards, set a maximum limit of like $750 or whatever your threshold may be for what's acceptable for that particular employee. If you have an employee that's just supposed to buy emergency only office supplies, $750 limit should be fine. Because if your process for ordering office supplies is so bad that you need more than that, redo your process. For bank accounts, what I like to do, I like profit first. Have a whole bunch of different bank accounts. You want to talk about a safety net. If somebody hacked into one bank account and you had 15 bank accounts, I know Profit First doesn't have 15 bank accounts, but you had all of your Profit First accounts set up. Okay, so they drain one. All right, they didn't get all your money. I also like to look at a liquidity every Monday. Are the total amount of outstanding credit card less than the total amount of cash I currently have on hand by a significant amount, right? Almost like a debt to income ratio. I like to look at that every week. And I know thinking about in the terms of a debt to income ratio, maybe not what most people want to do, but is your unsecured credit lower than your cash? Very simple. And that's something very easy to look at. And then you, like Rebecca said, look at it weekly. Can I pay my debts? Payroll is a debt. The people have already worked. They've already earned the money. Payroll is a debt. So you just throw it on there on the weeks that you do pay. So my payroll is X dollars plus my outstanding credit card payments is either positive or negative from the cash in the bank I have. So a lot of business continuity planning, a lot of continuity can be shortcut if you have cash on hand. And that's why I wanted to start with the financial aspect, right? You can fix a lot of problems if you have cash on hand. Mm-hmm. The next thing I want to talk to you about, Dan, is business continuity planning and idea of separating from an employee, right? So we have an employee, maybe an A+ employee that just their spouse gets transferred, they're in the military, the spouse gets transferred, and they have to go, right? Or you have a separation where you have somebody within your organization who was a very valuable employee who may not be that much so anymore, you have to separate from. How do you plan for that?
Those are tough. And hopefully in those situations, they become more anomalies than the norm. Because if it's the norm, then it's more probably internal that you need to look at. But when you get to those situations when an employee has to leave, it really kind of, I look at it to where start from the beginning. When you identify either a growth position or just a new position, what does that look like? And what is the role and responsibility going to be? And then when you hire that person, you want to train them, but you want to start documenting everything. As lawyers, we're always just document, just like with our attorneys. Anytime that they're going to do work for a client, we want to put a note in the file, because as you were talking in the last episode, I was thinking, break it down even for law firms. The continuity is just as simple as noting the file. So if something would happen to that attorney, another attorney can cover easily, right? And they pick up the file, read the notes, and know exactly what's going on, and they can go to court or wherever the case may be and represent the client, because you're not affecting the client. Continuity, I also look at is not just from the business side, but from the consumer, the customer side, the client side. We want to make sure that we're continuing moving forward and still providing that great service or that great product without substantial or hopefully minimal interruption to that person. And when you're in a situation where you have to separate from someone, I hear a lot of times, oh, well, that person has institutional knowledge. I remember I was at a company before here, and this seems to be the theme. Oh, that person has institutional knowledge. We can't separate from them. Oh, they have so much institutional knowledge. Well, great. Well, what does that mean? And let's take that institutional knowledge and let's write it down. And then we can figure out, okay, here's what is known. Here's how we can benefit from that. And then if something were to happen, whether we promote that person and they have other responsibilities, or we move on from them, or they leave us, we have it documented. It's just, I always just think of just when I train lawyers or talk to other employees or managers, it's document, right? I can't say that enough, because it benefits not just the company, but also your consumer, your client. So when you are faced with moving on from someone, you have everything written down. That's the job description, right? And then once it may morph into some other things, because I always look at job descriptions as being fluid. It's not, you're going to bring you on board for this, and that's the only thing I want you to do. No, I want that employee to take it and own it and create maybe something else, and let's learn and figure out what other needs are there that we can service. And so as these things continue to morph into something else, we're just writing down everything that goes along with that particular job. But then we're also identifying the processes and the procedures. So when we do move on, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, it's okay. It's almost kind of the next person up mentality. All right, we're going to train this person. So when the person in the current role leaves for whatever reason, the next person is ready to go, and they have everything ready to review and to be able to learn and to also improve on as well. So it's just making sure that when you're having these conversations with your team members, you're learning exactly what is their day to day. Because their day to day, I'm willing to bet and guarantee it's going to be a lot different than what you think, and then usually a lot different than what you thought you hired for. And that's not always a bad thing. I always look at change as a positive thing, because change, you can always take that as an opportunity to grow. And so it's just, again, I've repeated it several times, but it's worth repeating one more time. Just document what is going on.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point. Business continuity planning can be an extreme positive, like you promoted somebody, right? So somebody in your team is such an all-star that you're promoting them, and now the position they were filling is there's a hole created because in order to do the new job, they have to stop doing the old job. And so, Rebecca, in thinking about business continuity, how do you plan for that? Change in employees. They leave, they come, they get promoted without overhiring. How do you walk that very fine line?
I have not found that exact balance yet. So I don't know. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. Because it feels like when you have a business that's growing as rapidly as we have over the past couple of years, you're constantly needing to hire, you're constantly needing to recruit. And even if you feel like you're overhiring, it ends up kind of working out more often than not, because maybe someone else moves away or has a family situation or any number of other things that just sort of causes that natural attrition. But you feel it more when you're in those growth stages and you're trying to hire one and then you lose one and now you need to hire two, but you kind of maybe need to hire three. So that's for me. I feel like at this point I can't overhire because of our rapid growth. And once I hit the point where it actually happens and we actually do overhire, then I'll figure out how to deal with that then. But for the time being, it just feels like keep hiring, keep recruiting. You can't hire too much right now.
I know from a COO's point of view, Dan, your head probably just exploded when you heard we can't overhire. Don't worry
It's
about
not possible. I'm
it. It's not
trying
possible.
to.
Keep hiring.
I'm trying. I can't.
It's right. It's a fine balance to walk, and different companies are going to be in different stages, right? When you're in a high growth stage, an overhire may only be an overhire by a few months. And you might say, look, I'm going to use these few months to really train this person, get them ingrained to the team more so than a company that's growing at like a 3% or 5% year over year rate. Overhire might be relatively not feasible for them. And then you're talking about layoffs and first in first out models that really nobody wants to talk about. Part of business continuity coming to layoffs, Dan, I'll give you the easy one. Part of business continuity, as we talk about cash flow, as we talk about all of these things that we can fix, sometimes the market turns. Sometimes we steered the ship in a bad direction. We floated into, in using the blue ocean strategy, we floated deep into the red ocean. We're in a place where we don't need to be. How do you handle reductions in staff?
Those are tough, and that's not an easy one. You'll hear the acronym RIF, RIF, reduction in force. And it's, unfortunately, I've been through a couple of them, and some they're tough because you're not only downsizing a certain department or the company, but you're also affecting someone's livelihood through no fault of their own, but because of a turn in the market, or maybe a bad business decision was made that we have to eliminate a position. And I would say before a company comes to that situation, think of what can we do to make it work, right? I mean, we don't want to create positions just to create, because you're not helping yourself. The whole point of a RIF is because you've identified an issue, and the only way to resolve it is to eliminate a position, because you need to continue with the cash flow. Otherwise, you're going to be in a situation where you're not able to make payroll, not able to make the bills. So, but if there's an opportunity for growth somewhere in the company, maybe you can move that person over if they're willing to. But if not, then unfortunately you have to move on. Where a lot of companies don't, I'll say, may not understand. And I say that because when I went through one of them, I had to learn the hard way, because a RIF just isn't, okay, you're having a conversation with someone, you're moving on. You have to take into consideration if they're in a protected class, how many people you're laying off, what does that look like? What is the severance that you're going to offer? How much are you going to offer? Make sure it's equal to length of employment. Make sure you're in compliance with state laws. Make sure you're in compliance with the federal law. And then you have to give proper notice. And then if you are fortunate enough after the RIF that the company survives and thrives, that you're not rehiring for that same position, because you're going to want to talk with an employment lawyer, because if you lay off position X, you may not be able to hire position X with the same roles and responsibilities for a defined period of time.
Mhm.
And so you want to make sure that you're and compliant with that. There's also opportunities, and I did this in another company too, to where I always think of obviously the company first, right? You want to be company focused, firm focused, but then you want to look at the employee side of it too, the human side. Terminations, layoffs, rifts, they're not fun, no matter how experienced you are in them. Unfortunately, I've been part of them and I dread them. I don't sleep the night before. I'm nervous. It's just it's awful, but it's part of business. But one of the things that I experimented with at another company is furlough. And a lot of people will think, oh, well, furlough, I've only heard of that for federal employees, and it's not the case. You can use a furlough for your own company. And it can be a situation where you reduce pay for a certain period of time, then maybe that'll help you get over the bump. Or you, instead of a full layoff or a full RIF, you're reducing income and you're reducing workload, and then you ramp it back up later. And the benefit to that is, if long as employees are loyal and they understand, it all goes with what we've been talking about on every episode, right? Is communication and making sure that the employees know what's going on, that they may understand that, okay, instead of me being laid off, the company's really putting both interests and trying to run in parallel. And yeah, I'll take a reduction in pay and reduce time in the office, but I know that I still have a job, and I can do my part to get this company back on track. And then I can work my way back up to full-time employment, as opposed to the company just completely eliminating my position. Because sometimes you want to think bigger picture, and it may just be a certain period of time that you're weathering a storm. And in order to weather the storm, it's not let's just jump to a layoff or jump to a riff or whatever the case may be. It's, well, let's try this idea, and then have the leadership in it too, so everyone knows that we're all taking part of it. And then you just get that buy-in. And fortunately for me, it was a very special moment, because although it was tough having that conversation, but when the employee saw that leadership was being part of it and everyone was doing their role, you got the buy-in, and we weathered it. And fortunately for us, it was only a very short period of time, but it was an opportunity for us all to continue to really work together and bond and be able to come together for a great cause, which is getting the company back on track. But, if that's not an option, and it's not always an option, then, you have to do the layoffs. And you have to always make sure that whatever you're going into, right, you have the business in the forefront of your mind. It's always company first, not employee. Because when you start writing down names, you get attached to the names for whatever reason, and then you lose sight of the bigger picture, which is getting that company back on track, or making sure we're moving forward. And so it's really a position elimination, not a person elimination. And you have to identify what are the critical positions to get you through this storm. And then the other ones that don't fall in that category, unfortunately, would be the ones that you would either furlough or lay off. So that's kind of a probably longer-winded answer than you were expecting, but it's a serious situation that a company will most likely at least think about when they're trying to figure out, okay, we're not really making goal, we're not making revenue, what do we do here? And so it is something that you need to think about, because it goes with the whole continuity. What do we do if we don't continue to make revenue? But it's something that if you miss revenue once, it's just a thought. I would never encourage you to go straight to that as your go-to.
No, reductions in force, in my opinion, are last resort. Having been a part of a reduction on the receiving end of the reduction, right? I got asked to go somewhere else. Having been a low-level manager and having to deliver the bad news for what upper management decided to do, unfortunately, I've seen it all, and that's why I wanted to bring that one up last. I don't, for business continuity, I don't really talk about what happens if the building burns down. Like, if you don't know what you're going to do if your building burns down, then it's kind of the start of business continuity, right? We want to talk about more higher level things. And in thinking about business continuity, Dan, you said it, look at it from the customer's point of view. If you don't know where to start with business continuity planning, look at it, how am I going to continue to service my clients? Because so long as you continue to service your clients, so long as you continue to sell your product, you're going to be getting cash flow in the bank, and cash is king and will help you weather so many of these problems. So I want to thank Dan, you and Rebecca for joining me today to discuss business continuity. Next time, what we're going to discuss, it goes hand in hand with business continuity, is business succession planning, right? So I've got my business through these bad times. Now, what happens if I pass away? right? If I pass away today, where do my bank accounts go? Who knows my bank account passwords? Who's going to push enter on payroll? And what we can do to start thinking about our business from an entrepreneurial standpoint as a entity all of its own and not me. The business is no longer me. It is an entity that needs to support the families of the people that I hire. So join us next week as we talk about business succession planning. If you have any questions, leave the comments below, and we look forward to being able to talk to you. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.